So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to cover a session with some best practices and tips around managing general ledger accounts in Sage 300. Hopefully you'll find it useful, especially if you have a large chart of accounts. We'll cover some tips, and hopefully we should have some time towards the end for questions as well. Okay, so what we'll cover is some best practices around designing chart of accounts. Some tools on how you can mass create new GL accounts. So if you have a new cost center or department or division, how you can quickly create a whole bunch of new GL accounts. We'll cover a commonly asked question around inactive GL segments and how to handle those. And we'll also cover using a relatively new-ish feature called roll-up accounts. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Sage and we'll review some of these concepts. And yeah, if there are any questions, please type them into the chat and we'll cover those again at the appropriate time. Okay, so first concept is the best place to sort of to manage and view the chart of accounts and interact with the chart of accounts is the chart of accounts screen. Quite often when we're doing education or training, we see people, running various reports. And really the best place to manage this information and to work with it is the chart of accounts screen because it serves multiple purposes. So first of all, it is an instant trial balance. So you can see a trial balance for any period that you have on file instantly without having to run and rerun a report. Okay. You can also open up the account properties if you want to change a description or change certain properties about the account. You can drill into transactions. You can run a quick comparison. So if you want to compare actuals for a certain period to, say, actuals for a prior year, you can quickly do that on screen, or actuals versus budget for any year that you have on file. So these are all just shortcuts to other functions that you'll see within this folder. But again, the idea is the chart of accounts is sort of this multi-purpose screen that allow you to quickly get to all those functions right away without having to jump in and out of various screens and navigate. Okay. You can also access budget maintenance and see period by period historical comparisons. Okay, so let's talk about some best practices. The first is just around numbering. So Sage 300 does not force you into a particular numbering structure like a product like Sage 50 would, for example. So the numbering is really up to you. It can be anything you like. The numbers don't have a significance in terms of the meaning of the account, again, like you might see in something like Sage 50. But having said that, it's still a good idea to impose a certain amount of logic to your structure and have accounts numbered similarly. So as you can see here in the sample data, all of the bank accounts start with 10, okay, and accounts receivables are all start with 11, investments 1200, inventory 1300s, okay, fixed assets 1500s, cumulative depreciation 1600s. Okay, so you see there's a nice logical pattern there, and in addition to just making it logical for users, that'll really make your life easier when it comes to designing financial statements and reports, because it'll make it really easy to ask, for example, for a single line to show cash all rolled up on a single line just by saying, I want my 10 wildcard, right? All my accounts that start with 10. The other concept that is important when you get into multi-segment accounts, so whether you are tracking departments or divisions or cost centers or locations, whatever it might happen to be in your particular organization, you can have a multi-part or a segmented account number in Sage. And so when you're designing those numbers that relate to, again, either a department or a division or a region, it's important to give some thought to those numbers as well. And the idea here is that you want to, again, have some logical structuring and have numbers of, in this case, regions be similar if you might need to roll them up or report them together. So for example, if I had a new southeastern region, I might call that 25 or 21, right? And the reason being is that that'll help you take advantage of the functionality of the financial reporter or any other of the general ledger reports. So that if you wanted to run a report by region, then you could say, I want to, roll up the southern and the southeastern divisions and roll them up on a single report. Okay, so a little bit of logic and thought goes a long way. The other concept that's important here, and it's a fairly frequent question that gets asked, is when I'm running my financial statements, why are some of the descriptions on the line items coming up as blank? And so if you have a financial statement that is designed with rollups where you're aggregating multiple accounts on the same line. So here, for example, let's say I'm asking for all my 4010s to appear on a single line, and they get rolled up. Because the name of those accounts is consistent, it will be able to display sales accessories, right? Because there is no question or doubt. If that's not the case, and here's an example, let's say I'm rolling up all my accounts payable accounts into a single line, you'll see there's no commonality here. So if I'm rolling up these three accounts, the system is actually smart enough to look for the common portion, and so it would display accounts payable. It would drop off the comma space trade, comma space other, because those are not common. So it would properly display accounts payable. But if I'm also rolling up this account, you'll see that it's spelled differently, and so I would have a problem there because the system wouldn't be able to determine enough commonality, and so you get a blank. Okay, so using a consistent description is important as well. And again, you can have differentiating words at the end, but make sure that the beginning portion of the account descriptions are similar. Okay, so what happens if you, let's say, weren't around when these design decisions were made, and it's quite a number of years later, and the chart of accounts has grown, and it's a bit of a mess, and you've inherited a mess? We'll talk about this tool a little bit further in the session, but Sage 300, well, actually, before I talk about that, let's talk about an important concept here, which is that you cannot renumber an account in Sage just on the screen, right? So if I wanted to renumber this account 1521, then you'll see what happens is the button on the screen changes to add. Okay, so that account number is the unique identifier. There are some systems like QuickBooks, for example, where there's an internal sort of hidden account number. And so you can change the account number that you see at any time, because that internal account number, has not changed, and you're not messing with the internal connectivity of all the data, all the transaction history, et cetera, that belongs to that account. With Sage 300, that is not the case. There is no invisible hidden account number. It is the account number that you see. And so, if you try to change that account number, it will not let you. It'll assume that you want to add a new account. And that's because all of the linkages in the data, all of your history, all of your batches, et cetera, all the setups that refer to GL accounts are referring to not some hidden identifier, they're referring to this number. And so if you were to just change it, that might be, thousands and thousands of records in the database that need to be changed along with that. Okay, so you cannot do it that simply, but there is a tool that does allow you to do it properly. And that tool is called the account code change tool. And it is like a souped up find and replace tool that allows you to properly queue up these changes. And so I can, take my account 1520 and properly renumber it as 1521. And the idea with this is that whether it's one change or many changes, if you can do a wholesale change of your chart of accounts, you queue up these changes and then you would post these when everyone is logged out of the system, and more importantly, after you've taken a backup, just in case anything were to go wrong. And what this does is it'll search through the entire set of data. Again, all of your history, all of your batches, your subledger batches, et cetera. Anywhere there's a reference to that GL account, it will retroactively change it. And that's another important point, is that it is a retroactive change. So it will look like you had been doing it that way all along. Okay, so no need to create new GL accounts and journalize balances over and do it sort of the manual, messy way. Okay, this will do it for you, and it's again retroactive. Okay, so let's talk about another scenario. Again, if you have a large chart of accounts or you have a complicated setup with multiple cost centers or locations. In this particular account set, we have up to a 3-part account number, which is account, division, and region. Okay, and we have a combination of those various segments. Okay. So let's look at a scenario where, let's say I want to add a new region. Actually, let's do a division instead. Okay, so let's say I wanted to add a new division. So my business or my organization requires that I do some additional tracking. We've had an expansion, whatever it may be. And so now I have an industrial division. Okay, so I will add that division into my list here. General ledger setup segment codes is where you define those segments. So anything other than the account number itself. So now that I've added that new division in, I have all sorts of accounts that refer to the existing divisions 100 and 200. That would be an onerous exercise to add those all in one by one. So what you can certainly do is use the very good universal export-import facility to export out your account profiles. And what you can do is certainly apply criteria to that to say that you wanted to export only the accounts with division 100 as an example. And then you could do some find, replace in Excel and pull those back in. The export import in Sage 300 is very good, very powerful. So you can certainly do that. But rather than show you that functionality, I'll show you a tool that's built right into General Ledger that allows you to do this very quickly and very powerfully as well. So I'm going to use the tool in General Ledger GL Accounts. It's the icon called Create Accounts. And just before I do that, I'll just reinforce another concept as well. So in our chart of accounts, again, we have different types of accounts: 1-part accounts, 2-part accounts, 3-part accounts. Those are defined in terms of their properties by what's called a structure code. And the structure code just tells the system what kind of account you're trying to build. A single segment account, a divisional type account, which has the account and division number, or in my case here, it could be a regional account. And these are not hard coded in the system. They will be whatever has been defined for your particular organization. And so those structures are defined in the setup so that you can tell the system what kind of accounts you want to deal with. Single part accounts that have the account structure. The divisional structure uses account and division, and then the regional structure uses all 3 segments. So when it comes to using this Create GL Accounts tool, the first thing you start with is talking about what kinds of accounts you're working with. Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll start with working with divisional accounts. Okay, and what I'm doing here is saying, what do I want to use as my basis? Well, I want to work with divisional accounts, and from those divisional accounts, I want to create more divisional accounts. Okay, so I'm using divisional accounts as the basis and outputting new divisional accounts. So the next question is, well, what do you want to base this on? and I want to base it on a particular segment or a part of the GL account. And so I'm going to base that on my divisional segment because, again, I'm creating a new division, industrial division 300, and I'm going to base it on an existing division because presumably I want roughly the same layout of accounts. Okay, and the division that I'm going to base it on is the one that's maybe closest to the new division. So I'll pick commercial, okay, because it's probably has this similar range of accounts that I would want for the industrial division. These checkboxes here allow you to default some of the other account properties, subledger control account properties, multi-currency properties. Okay, and this checkbox here will specify whether you want to see in the list that's going to be generated accounts that may already exist. In this case, I wouldn't see any because I just created that new division. But if I had already maybe started this and started creating a couple one by one, and I wanted to see the ones that I've created already, ticking this box will show me that. Okay. So finally, what I'm going to do on the bottom of the screen is specify that I want to create a new division or a new set of accounts based on the division, I should say. And I want to create accounts for division 300. So I'll say 300 to 300. The reason I have from and to here is I may have just created two new divisions, 300 and 400. And let's say I wanted to create the accounts all at once for both divisions. I could do that in one go, right? 300, 400. In my case, I'm only setting up one new division, so I'm going to use 300, 300. Okay. And I'm going to default the options from my division 100 accounts. Okay, and that's really just a repeat of what I've set up here. The reason it seems like it's a repeat is because this is a relatively simple example. You can get fairly complicated with multi-segmented accounts in terms of how you're doing this. Okay. So there's my set of rules. I'm going to create divisional accounts from divisional accounts based on accounts that are in division 100. And from those accounts, I want to create division 300. So the basic idea here is what I'm saying is I want the system to find all of the accounts that have the -100 that are in division 100. And anytime it finds one of those, I want it to create a new account, but with division 300 in its place. Okay, that's effectively what I'm saying here. And that's how I would ask for that. Once I've specified that, I can hit preview, and I'll get a nice preview of the matching accounts. Okay, so the nice thing about this function is it does show you what's going to happen. It doesn't just go ahead and do it. And it will show you this nice preview of what's been generated. Okay. And the nice thing about this screen is it is not just a report. It is an actual sort of working copy. So you can edit individual account descriptions or really any property about the account, its type, its account grouping, whether it's a control account, multi-currency settings, basically anything that you would see on the account profile screen, you can tweak or modify here. Okay, so it's all editable. And you can even specify that, well, maybe you don't want to include certain accounts because maybe a certain type of expense does not apply to this new division. So I can tell it that I do not want to create that new account. The other thing you'll see with the descriptions is that it's trying to be helpful and intelligent here, and it is taking the existing GL account descriptions and it's putting a comma, space, and then the name of the new division, in this case, on the end. Okay. And so that's just to be helpful when you're looking up accounts by their description, so you know what division that belongs to. Again, that will not break your financial statement roll-ups because the first part of the account description is common with the other ones. Okay. If you don't like that, you can certainly edit those. If you have a bunch of them to edit, that's a little bit tedious. So the other nice thing about this is you can export this preview to a spreadsheet, make some quick changes, and pull it back in. Okay. You can also print a report version of this if you want to send it to someone else, perhaps to maybe edit or vet it. Okay. So once you're happy with what you have here and which accounts you want to create and all the properties, then it's a matter of clicking process and it will create those new accounts. You can just jump back into the preview at any time. Or if you didn't quite, understand the meaning of all these boxes and you generated a preview of accounts that you really didn't want, then you can just hit clear to start all over again. So the other important point here is that this process is by account structure. So if, like in the example of our sample data here, we have divisional accounts that are in multiple structures. So meaning my divisions are in divisional accounts as well as regional accounts, right, with the -10 and 20 on the end. I would need to do this in 2 passes. Okay, so after hitting process to get it to create all those new divisional accounts, the 2-part accounts, okay, I would just repeat the process. So instead of creating accounts, I'm just going to tell it to clear, okay, and I would repeat the process and I would just do it over again for my 3-part or regional accounts. Okay, I would tell it to create regional accounts from regional accounts. But otherwise it would be largely the same. So I would say use 100 division 100 accounts as my basis. So again, it would look at all these regional or 3-part accounts that have 100, and it would create new versions of those with 300. Okay. And this would look basically the same here, where I'd say create 300 to 300, defaulting from 100. And I'm not creating any new regions. I'm basically inheriting or keeping the regions that I already have, right? So it's going to create a 5000-300-10 and a 5300-20, but I'm not creating a new 30 region as an example as part of this exercise. Okay. But you certainly could, right? So again, this is flexible enough that you can do some more complicated things and create accounts in multiple segments at the same time. The nice thing about this, it's something that you don't use very often, so it can be a little overwhelming, not understanding what these boxes mean. But the nice thing about it is you get this preview, right? So there's no harm in trying it, seeing what it generates, and if it's not what you had in mind, then just hit clear. And so there's the same idea, but this time with my 3-part accounts, creating all the new versions of of those existing accounts, the existing 100 division accounts, but now with division 300 in its place, and I have all the same options. So let's talk about one other concept, a question that comes up a lot, and the question has to do with the limitation in terms of, again, whether it's departments or programs or divisions, whatever it happens to be that you're tracking in your chart of accounts. When I define those in Sage, there is no ability to mark it inactive, right? So I can set up my divisions in this case, but I can't mark them inactive. I can mark the individual accounts inactive, which is great, meaning that I will not be able to post to those accounts. But that only solves one part of the problem. And the other problem that it does not solve is if I've made division 200, my retail division, inactive, and I have a process where I run divisional financial statements separately, meaning the system is going to produce a financial statement for division 100, then a separate one for 200, then a separate one for 300. What'll happen in this case, even if I've made all the 200 accounts inactive, it still exists as a division, and there's no way to mark that division inactive. So the system thinks it still needs to produce a financial statement for it. And this is a question that comes up with some regularity. And so what ends up happening is you just get this blank, financial statement that always gets generated in the middle. Okay. So the quick workaround for that is to relocate that division, okay, to a number at the end, so that you can basically ignore it. So if I were to rename or renumber my 200 division to 900 or 999, then that would allow me to say I want to do all my divisions from the beginning through to 899, right, and ignore that one. And the easy way to do that is using the chart of accounts, the account code change tool. And there's a nice little feature in there that allows you to do that very quickly. Okay, and that's using this change by example. So first thing I will do actually is I will create my new placeholder, right? So if I wanted to do make a home, a new home for my retail division, and so I create that new number, and then I would use the account change tool to say that I wanted to, and again, I would do this in 2 passes in this case, because I do my divisional accounts first, and then I do my regional accounts. And so what I'd say is I want to change, by example, all my 200 accounts into 999 accounts. And the match will find all those accounts for me and populate this change list, okay? So it's basically relocating all those accounts. And I could do the same thing again, this time for my regional accounts. Do the same thing, all my 200s become 999, match. And you can see very quickly I've got it to create that list for me. That's very easy to do, okay? So I've created, perhaps a couple hundred changes in a few seconds. And again, just to reinforce, that's the easy part. The system will do the work for you there. Just really make sure you understand that you can save these changes, review them, queue them up. But when it comes to posting the changes, you do need to have everyone out of the system. You do need to have a window of time depending on the size of your data. It could be 15 minutes, it could be a few hours, right? Depending on how much history you have on file that has to change and how many changes you're making. Okay, so you do want to plan that part accordingly. Make sure you have a good backup before you do it, and then let the system sort of plug away at the end of a day or on a weekend or something.
Perfect, Dean. Thank you. We do have to kind of wrap up, but we did get a question from the audience, and they did ask the question, what if someone has created tens of accounts that are now unused / irrelevant? Okay,
so the best way to manage that is to mark individual accounts inactive. Okay, so it's sort of a multi-part process here, where the first step is to mark an account inactive. You want to prevent people from posting to that account. Okay, so mark it inactive first. And once you've marked a number of accounts inactive, there's sort of 2 scenarios. One is, let's say they've created a bunch of new accounts. They didn't get used. You've caught it early enough and you've marked them inactive. Then the next step would be to use the periodic processing, period end maintenance. And there is a option in there to delete inactive accounts. Okay. And it'll tell you, again, it doesn't want people working in the system while it's doing that. So it doesn't want to, it doesn't want the scenario where you're deleting an account that someone may have just selected in an open batch or something. So it will require you to have everyone log out when it does this.
Perfect.
But otherwise, what it'll do is it'll scan through the accounts and it will try to delete them. Okay, and it will tell you if it cannot, and in this case it can't, because it's saying there's history. So it won't allow you to delete an account that has history. So this is where it's a multi, part process, where if someone did post some transactions in there, even if you journalize them out to a new account, there is still history in that account, and so it doesn't want you to allow you to delete that, to potentially create a trial balance that doesn't balance, even if it's from 7 years ago. Okay. So depending on how long you're keeping history, you'll need to wait for that history to drop off, right? Which will happen automatically when you run your GL create new year, your year end close function. It'll look for history to delete based on your settings, how much history you want to keep. And once that history drops off, then you can just run this process again. And you can run this, after every year end, for example, and just get it to delete any old accounts. Okay, but in the meantime, your best bet is to make them inactive.